Imagine if one whisper could shatter an empire built on secrets. What if the truth about hidden payments and silenced voices finally exploded in a room full of power players? Hold on tight, because this is the story of a hearing that changed everything. At precisely 47 seconds into the session, Jasmine Crockett leaned in close and whispered those fateful words, one name, Stormy Daniels. And in that instant, Trump's confident grin fractured like fragile glass right there on national television. But she was not done yet. She smoothly revealed two more sealed envelopes. No names etched on them, just chilling figures locked inside like buried truths. From $3 to $15,000 in covert hush money. 3 distinct signatures, all from the same pen, concealing one massive deception, too enormous to remain hidden forever. If Stormy was merely the opening act, who were the other 2 women? Trump compensated to fade into oblivion. The red tally light on the C-SPAN camera flickered once before settling into an unyielding glare. It scanned the oversight chamber like an eternal watchful eye, capturing history in the making before anyone realized its significance. The walls gleamed with a polish meant to echo authority, but this morning they mirrored something darker, a tense expectation. Not the hopeful kind that inspires, but the foreboding type that senses disaster looming publicly and irrevocably. Right at 10 a.m., the massive oak doors groaned open. Jasmine Crockett entered the chamber, her heels clicking sharply, her posture unyielding, and in her left hand, a lone red folder. She wore no smug expression. She did not require one. The hush that trailed her was not merely about arrival. It was about exacting impact. Jasmine had not arrived to put on a show. She had come to ignite a firestorm. On the opposite side, Donald Trump sat clad in a navy suit, slightly too snug with a smile stretched too broad. Arms crossed, chin raised high. He reclined as if certain the lenses still favored him. To his right, his legal advisors rustled documents they had yet to examine. To his left, his seat creaked faintly as he shifted for a clearer view, not of the folder, but of Jasmine herself. He grinned in his signature way, as though power was a reflective surface no woman had ever dared to shatter. Melania was absent from the scene. The clerk declared the session underway. The gavel struck. 1 resonance, 2 then utter stillness. Jasmine wasted no breath on pleasantries. She advanced, laid the red folder on the table, and deliberately unveiled it. From its depths, she extracted 3 identical envelopes, cream-hued and substantial. Without uttering a sound, she arranged them left to right on the table, like solemn cards, at a wake for someone feigning life. The room held its collective breath. Trump's grin tensed almost imperceptibly. No one else grasped the contents. Not at that moment. But the deliberate placement prompted every aide to inch forward and every Congress member to straighten slightly. Somewhere in the back, a journalist let a pen slip. It clattered like a sudden shot. 1 envelope bore a red dot label. The next was unmarked. The third showed a faint crease at the top, as if gripped fiercely before release. Silence reigned. Jasmine rested her hand lightly on the final one, almost guarding it, or perhaps intentionally so. She lifted her gaze straight to Trump, not glancing past or above, but piercing through. Then she delivered 5 precise words, "Let us discuss campaign fraud." That was all it took. Trump's lawyer, 2 seats away, bolted upright, interrupting nothing. He had not been summoned. No name had been called, but whatever he glimpsed or imagined propelled him like spotting a primed explosive where a mere prop was anticipated. Committee Chairwoman Edith Powers arched a brow. "Is there an objection, Counselor?" He offered no reply, for by then Jasmine had already unsealed the first envelope and drawn out something far from ordinary paperwork. It resembled a trigger ready to detonate. But what precisely lurked in those envelopes that drove Trump's attorney to defy protocol before any charge was voiced aloud? What if a single check could tilt the balance of an entire room, exposing layers of deceit? Brace yourself as the revelations unfold, one by one. The instant the first check touched the surface, the chamber seemed to sway off balance. Printed on premium security paper, complete with watermarks and grids, the sort of financial record that exudes authenticity even when drenched in falsehood. Dated October 18th, 2006. Payable to Stephanie Clifford, though the world recognized her as Stormy Daniels. Jasmine allowed the name to linger for a heartbeat. Not bellowed, not exaggerated. Simply uttered like a match held a fraction too long before igniting. $130,000 memo line consultation discretion. She needed no elaboration on its implication. Everyone understood. The strain crackled like electricity. Trump remained motionless, but the earlier smirk had morphed into a rigid jawline. One of his attorneys leaned ahead. Another braced as if poised to challenge but held back. Perhaps because Jasmine had not yet accused. She had merely unveiled. She extended her hand calmly to the second envelope. Her fingers steady. If anything, they appeared to decelerate like performing a delicate operation sans numbing. This one dated November 12, 2006. Issued via American Media Incorporated, a Florida publisher infamous for suppressing tales rather than sharing them. The recipient, Karen McDougal, ex-Playboy model, $150,000. The memo stated rights acquisition never to release. But this was no journalistic endeavor. This was silence manufactured on a grand scale. Jasmine lifted it briefly, rotated it toward the cameras, and positioned it alongside the Stormy Daniels check. They appeared nearly twins, two instruments of concealment disguised as routine forms. No voices rose in the room, but postures began to adjust. A senator inclined forward, squinting at the displays. A reporter murmured to her superior, mouthing, "Verify this date." Phones vibrated in quick bursts, not singly but in waves, like an accelerating pulse across the press section. Then arrived the third envelope. Jasmine parted it with the same resolute composure. The enclosed check was modest in sum, merely $35,000, but carried a denser, more personal gravity. The payee, Summer Zerbos, a past apprentice participant who later alleged assault by Trump. Memo: legal resolution, maintain confidentiality. This payment stemmed not from a media outlet or facade entity, but from a law practice tightly tied to Trump's defense fund, a firm that per campaign finance logs invoiced thousands that very week. Jasmine set it beside the pair, creating a lineup of muted aggression. 3 identities, 3 females, 3 issuing sources, 3 enforced quiets. But then she highlighted the most condemning element. Not the identities, not the sums, not the notations, the autograph. Each bore the identical bold sweeping script, Donald J. Trump. Same slant, same force, same relentless angle on the uppercase T. She enlarged the visuals on the screen. Split view, all 3 overlaid vertically, in impeccable alignment. Jasmine averted her eyes from Trump. She faced the chairwoman. These were no personal disbursements from a private fund. Each transaction funneled through an operation directly or tangentially linked to Mr. Trump's campaign legal efforts or media allies. A sharp intake of air resounded from the second tier. And furthermore, she proceeded, voice unwavering. All 3 dispersed between October 2006 and February 2007, the identical period Melania Trump recuperated from delivery. While one lady tended their infant, 3 others received discreet compensation to evaporate. The phrases did not assault. They did not indict. They simply struck like mallets on fragile bone. Trump exhaled harshly through his nostrils. He edged forward yet uttered nothing. One of his counsel jotted frantically on a notepad. Jasmine retreated from the table, her gaze sweeping the array of documents, now arrayed like a crime tableau. Jasmine maintained her stance like rock enduring tempests, unmoved beneath the harshest camera beams. Her focus remained fixed, unswerving like a marksman aligned on repercussions. This concerns not ethics, she declared. It involves funds. It involves orchestration. It involves a recurring signature across 3 distinct concealments, each backed by a framework designed to shield one individual. And as the chamber froze in suspense, she posed not dramatically, but with subdued intensity. If these 3 checks share the identical signature, then whom precisely was Donald Trump safeguarding, his union, his bid, or his own self? Could a signature alone unravel years of denials? Get ready for the forensic twist that leaves no room for doubt. The displays behind Jasmine ignited like courtroom illuminations pre-verdict. Side by side, the 3 checks floated on screen, each inscribed with that distinctive sweeping curve, Donald J. Trump. Identical ink saturation, identical pressure, identical jagged incline on the J, resembling a blade more than a moniker. No wavering, no surrogate scribe, no feasible evasion. And then Jasmine produced the dossier that compelled the room to draw breath. She elevated a clear sleeve containing a forensic script analysis, bearing the official emblem of the Document Examination Department. Her delivery remained even keen enough to incise without exceeding a murmur. The assembly inclined forward unprompted. We forwarded all 3 checks for autonomous forensic scrutiny, she stated. 3 separate facilities, 3 distinct states, absolute isolation from one another. Click. The findings materialized on screen, a segment underscored in blue. Verdict. All 3 inscriptions penned by the same person, pinpointed via biometric script indicators as Donald J. Trump. Trump did not flinch, but his right cheek spasmed just once. A subtle quiver seized by the alternate camera perspective, sufficient for every observer to jot annotations. Jasmine ignored him. She sustained her emphasis on the realities, the sort that did not shout but dissected. The evaluations dismissed Michael Cohen. They dismissed legal stand-ins. They even dismissed autopin replicas, which your administration has employed for ages. These were not outsourced choices, she appended. They were intentional acts. A gasp arose from the audience section. Another muttered, he inscribed them personally. Trump's counsel half rose from his position, then resettled. Jasmine advanced, positioning the analysis straight onto the testimony surface, adjacent to the check array, now smoldering like untouchable proof. She gazed upward gradually. Mr. Trump, she articulated distinctly. If that inscription is yours, then you are not merely compensating for quiet. You were deducting disloyalty as an electoral outlay. The ensuing quiet was the variety only perceived when sanctity fractures openly. Trump refrained from speech. He gazed intently. His lips quivered as if contemplating words, then abstained. For the initial instance, since the proceedings commenced, he appeared diminished within his own seat. Distantly, a siren wailed softly. Or perhaps it was merely the echo of dominance commencing its slide. Jasmine pivoted to the chairwoman, her tone still calibrated. We possess an additional witness this morning. What if a hidden ledger held the key to buried betrayals? Prepare for the surprise testimony that shakes the foundations. She retrieved a slender, unmarked gray dossier, freshly conveyed. Unlike the prior ones, this had not originated from communal repositories. It had not been compelled weeks prior. This was 11th hour, hushed, perilous. They approached 48 hours ago, she announced. Their identity remains undisclosed. Trump rigidified. One of his assistants inclined and murmured vehemently into his ear. Jasmine's inflection stayed level, but her stare fastened on him. They are not present to recount what we already comprehend, she asserted. They are here to disclose what even your innermost circle never anticipated. The gallery hummed like an electrified cable. Someone etched furiously on a legal tablet. The space appeared to suspend respiration. But who was this enigmatic witness? And what had they observed that Trump invested 17 years attempting to obliterate? The portals parted once more, and this occasion the assembly scarcely responded. No majestic ingress, no resounding strides, just a subdued, wavering silhouette materializing from the corridor like a recollection not meant to resurface. Her name lacked fame, but the dossier she clutched posed greater threat than countless banners. Lisa Cohen progressed leisurely, gripping a slim manila dossier, as though it might dissolve upon release. Her spectacles captured the illumination as she neared the witness station, each stride laden with the strain that renders atmosphere denser. She directed her eyes downward, not from frailty, but from having witnessed excess. Jasmine observed her steadfastly mute, granting room for solemnity to proceed. As Lisa seated herself, the chamber inclined as if signaled. Trump blinked rapidly. He narrowed his eyes, striving to identify her. Then recognition dawned. His bearing altered minutely, like a man recalling the undercompensated domestic aid. Not dread, not astonishment, merely annoyance. Jasmine shattered the quiet. Miss Cohen, we appreciate your presence. Simply convey what you presented to me. Lisa affirmed with a nod. Her hands quivered, but her tone endured. She unveiled the dossier and extracted a digitized image of a Trump Organization internal register from 2006. It seemed commonplace, initially columns of disbursements, dates, codes, but the header conveyed otherwise. Personal gift outlay, discretionary, and along the margin a manual notation stood prominent in angled black ink. Consult legal should media inquire. She positioned the sheet flat on the surface. There existed 3 entries mismatched to the remainder. October, November, February, 130,000, 150,000, 35,000, designated as advisory publishing restraint and legal publicity. The figures aligned with the 3 females Jasmine had presented. Jasmine drew nearer, her delivery serene yet piercing. Miss Cohen, who possessed access to this dossier, Lisa, elevated her gaze. Solely three individuals, myself, the chief financial officer, and Mr. Trump. That struck forcefully. Discernible whispers swept the space. Jasmine unblinking. She extended and pivoted the record toward the panel, tapping the column with her digit like a maestro steering a concluding chord. You were informed these constituted advisory expenses, but what were they truly? Lisa faltered, then lowered her sight. I was instructed to refrain from questioning, but I retained a duplicate prior to system erasure. I reasoned someday it might matter. Jasmine nodded. She bore no grin. This was no victory. This was an injury being chronicled. She accentuated the footer, a brief annotation in denser ink than the balance. Dispersed discreetly, handle as publicity. Trump's counsel adjusted. One aide conferred with another, but Jasmine's voice sliced through entirely. Why would an electoral register bear gift disbursements? Encoded as advisory. And crucially, if the accounts were revised, who else received compensation to vanish before the ink settled? What secrets hide in a forgotten day planner? Discover the handwritten note that ties it all together. Lisa Cohen hesitated before speaking further. She delved into her dossier, her fingers skimming past numerous printed sheets before halting on one solitary page. This time not a fiscal register. Something more intimate. A duplicated leaf from a 2006 Trump organization schedule dated merely 2 weeks post the Stormy Daniels transaction. The pigment had dimmed faintly, but the script stayed acute. The variety of penmanship that not only logs directives but commands them. She propelled the page across to Jasmine, who elevated it without pause. The chamber leaned ahead as if sensing the imminent shift. At the summit, inscribed in stark black ink, were 2 mere lines, yet they resounded louder than any oration Trump had delivered. Resolve K&S discreetly. Bestow M post-gathering. Jasmine's lips separated marginally as she perused the entry anew, more deliberately this time. Then she raised her head, her eyes fastened on the figure opposite as if challenging an explanation. Trump unblinking. He merely clenched his jaw. A temple muscle pulsed. The screens magnified the page. The abbreviations evident. K&S Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. M. Melania. The notation was not entombed in some voluminous file. Not veiled in juridical jargon. It was penned straightforwardly like a shopping roster. Accept this exchange quiet for appearances and treachery for tactics. Jasmine's tone ascended yet remained composed. Not furious. Surgical. Thus Karen and Stormy were expenditures. And Melania the publicity barrier. A keen gasp reverberated from the chamber's left flank. One congresswoman shielded her mouth. Journalists halted mid-keystroke. Even Chairwoman Powers, hitherto reticent, inclined an inch nearer her microphone. Trump issued no retort, but his left hand balled into a fist on the armrest. Jasmine paced leisurely to the room's core, clutching the planner like proof in a homicide proceeding. She addressed Lisa. Existed other such pages. Lisa shook her head. This sole one I preserved. They routinely excised sensitive folios after Friday assemblies. But this I digitized before destruction. Why? Because I grasped its implication. Lisa's voice fractured not from anxiety. From recollection from observing too much interred by those who never glanced rearward, Jasmine examined the notation again. Its starkness rendered it merciless. Resolve. Bestow. 2 imperatives, 1 incentive. On the display behind her, the planner enlarged further. Beneath the note in finer script, the title of a prestigious Fifth Avenue gem merchant. 1 listing, 1 timestamp. 45 p.m. Select Emerald for mission. Jasmine redirected to Trump. So as 2 females were compensated to dissolve another, was presented a necklace to gleam before the lenses. Trump proffered no response. He remained immobile. Jasmine persisted. We examined every formal image of Melania that month, every White House affair, every charitable banquet, every communal occasion. Not a single instance did she don a green emerald pendant. She halted. Permitted the suspense to root, which prompts a query this assembly and the American populace merit to pose. What precisely did Melania obtain that week? And why has it never appeared publicly? Imagine a check that crosses from personal betrayal into outright illegality. Watch as the 4th revelation exposes the laundering of secrets. Jasmine remained steadfast as she delved into the red folder's concluding compartment. The emerald reference still faintly shimmered on the displays, a spectral quiet where sparkle ought to reside. But now the narrative pivoted from concealed gems and jewel cases to monetary paths inscribed in ink. She withdrew a lone sheet, letting it capture the glow. A check uncomplicated, audacious, and incriminating. Dated December 4th, 2006. Sum, $150,000. Memo reimbursed legal accord. That in isolation might spark intrigue until she vocalized its origin. Not a private ledger, not even a Trump or commercial conduit, drawn from Victory Vision PAC. That designation landed like a fissure in the foundation. The screen illuminated with the depiction. The check immaculate issued from a donor-supported political action committee formed to bolster voter engagement and traditional agendas. Not compensations, not suppressions, and assuredly not covert settlements. Jasmine refrained from elevating her tone. Unnecessary. Each syllable descended like a judge's hammer. This exceeds campaign tactics. It is cleansing quiet through national fervor. And endorsed by the individual in this space, Trump crossed one leg atop the other jaw, fixed, but his form tauter now. He avoided the screen. No need. His endorsement there in plain sight, bold, unmistakable. Chairwoman Edith Powers inclined her delivery flat, yet cutting as shards. This solitary check breaches at minimum 4 national laws. Electoral finance, misuse, PAC fund abuse, non-disclosure, donor deceit. Her inflection stayed level, but penetrated deeper than any outcry. The room's hush was not astonished. It was assimilating like the air growing weightier, as if every observer comprehended they no longer viewed politics. They beheld prosecution in gradual progression. Jasmine approached the committee surface and aligned the check with the others. 4 checks presently, Stormy Karen Summer Victory Vision, each chillier than its predecessor. But this transcended immorality. It was unlawful. She glanced upward to the press balcony, then returned to the panel. And all that capital originated not from individual reserves. It stemmed from faithful contributors who believed they fueled a cause, a purpose, a tomorrow. Instead, they financed a fabrication. Trump's knuckles blanched against the armrest. One of his aides etched wildly on a pad, but none interjected. None ventured. Jasmine stood immobile, her voice akin to a fuse nearing the blast. If that check aimed to mute a controversy, then the reality belongs not solely to this venue. It pertains to those who funded it. And if the funds derive from donors, what transpires when they at last perceive what their faith truly procured? What if a victim's voice could echo louder than any document? Listen closely as Summer Zervos breaks the silence in her own words. The displays dimmed, the chamber lights trailed. No audio, no melody, no signal, just an abrupt stillness, as if the structure itself commenced holding its breath. Jasmine withdrew from the table, her tone firm as the backdrop screen flickered alive. We now shift to testimony from Summer Zervos. The visual emerged gradually. Summer perched in a basic chair, hands clasped firmly in her lap, eyes mildly reddened, yet resolute. No cosmetics, no counsel, flanking just a woman before the lens in a space too hushed to contain her forthcoming words. I competed on The Apprentice. I viewed it as a chance, something to transform my existence, and it did merely not as I envisioned. She expressed plainly, but each term carried the heft of something practiced not for spectacle but endurance. Trump had summoned her to a hotel rendezvous for career talks. She felt thrilled, anxious. She donned her finest attire. He welcomed her in a bathrobe. He remarked, "Loyalty unlocks paths." That advancement required trusting him and allowing his trust. No necessity for explicit particulars. Her tone faltered once alone. That sufficed. She described being touched, retreating bewilderment and humiliation enveloped in praise and apprehension. She narrated departing that space altered from her entry self. Weeks onward, his aide phoned, stating a resolution would be proffered via a trust mechanism. No identifiers, just figures. She never endorsed anything outright. The funds materialized. So did the quiet. She halted, then stared directly into the optic. He claimed my quiet was an asset, but I forfeited all. My enterprise, my expression. A undulation traversed the chamber. Not clamor, just burden. The type of instant that compresses chests without contact. One aide rearward set down her pen. Jasmine immobile. She permitted the terms to embed like dust on freshly stirred soil. Summer's footage concluded not with theatrical departure, but a prolonged, unwavering gaze into the camera, as if defying disbelief. The illuminations revived, the display blanked. Trump adjusted in his chair, yet silent. His counsel murmured something. He ignored. Jasmine advanced a pace. She required no cues. She needed no clarification. You have now beheld the countenance of one woman remunerated to vanish. But what amplifies her narrative is not the currency, it is the mechanism. She glanced at the check tagged legal publicity and back to the mute screens. For if this method silenced one woman, how many others heard the identical falsehood? The display showed no visage, only a silhouette. The voice through the amplifiers was altered deep and cautious. A ripple coursed the chamber not from surprise, but comprehension of its import. When attorneys opt for anonymity, it never concerns airing fear. It regards the peril of ultimately voicing verity. Jasmine seated her focus anchored on the display. The chairwoman nodded subtly. The space quieted anew. The speaker a prior compliance counsel with the Trump organization. Credentials authenticated, identity concealed. What he articulated next severed the residual echo from Summer's tone. These transactions did not surface in our books as resolutions. They were cataloged under internal human resources, safeguards labeled non-disclosure assurance. The terms impacted like a strike. Several panel members traded looks. The phrase was not juridical, not even typical corporate abbreviation. It was entirely fabricated to cloak something decayed. We possessed frameworks, the voice persisted. 3 levels each gauged by the perceived menace the woman posed to the image. Level 1 repute. Level 2 press hazard. Level 3 juridical vulnerability. He paused. The chamber suspended breath. Summer Zervos, he affirmed, rated level 3. Jasmine unflinching. She inclined slightly ahead, her delivery solid yet serene. How many such transactions did you observe? At least 5, perhaps additional, he replied. Not all documented correctly. Some routed via external advisory charges. Others from ledgers connected to Trump holdings, casinos, lodgings, even secluded golf havens. Trump fidgeted in his seat, clearly disturbed. He withheld words, but his foot rapped once on the marble. Not boisterous, but persistent, repetitive, like tallying moments to disrupt. Jasmine regarded him steadfast. Her demeanor conveyed not this occasion. The display presented a document partly obscured, yet recognizable. A preparation directive for human resources staff, with a line marked yellow. If individual threatens media outreach, elevate to level 2. Direct through counsel. Avoid interaction. The voice resumed. These were not singular occurrences. This was framework. We managed not errors. We administered peril by expunging individuals. Someone in the balcony whispered audibly, Jesus. A reporter let fall their pen, disregarding retrieval. The visual dissolved. The display darkened, but the resonance of framework lingered airborne like a charged filament. Jasmine arose, allowing the quiet to exert its influence. Then she articulated deliberately. If such an intricate design persists, then it operated not on currency solely. She surveyed the chamber. Her tone descended softer, now nearly provocative. It functioned on commands, on safeguarding, on individuals who knew and elected to sustain it. She halted sufficiently for the gravity to immerse. For if the design is this vast, who else participated? What personal pain fuels a fight for justice? Uncover the backstory that makes this battle profoundly intimate. The concluding terms from the nameless counsel still reverberated as the displays faded to obscurity. No further records, no additional voices, merely quiet extending across the oversight space like a tautened strand. Jasmine stood unmoving, her palm resting on the red folder that had scorched through every veneer of political spectacle in the venue. But this instance, she did not grasp another check or display. She reached into something more ancient. She elevated her gaze, serene yet steadfast, and commenced speaking with a tranquility that drew the chamber inward once more. At age 11, my mother forfeited her position. She pilfered nothing. She arrived punctually. She excelled as a nurse in that facility. But one evening she entered a lounge and beheld a familiar man, a state authority, influential, intoxicated, engaging in impropriety. He murmured into the ear of a scarcely aware patient. And as my mother advanced, he grinned as if accustomed. She reported it the following dawn. Within 3 weeks, they deemed her overly sentimental for the trauma unit. They revised her assessments. They reshuffled her duties. And then they dismissed her. The authority persisted. No probe, no session. Just one female expelled, while a male retained his rank and attire. Jasmine's voice held firm. It honed. My mother wept once, solely once. On a Sunday evening, lights extinguished her uniform still in the hamper. She informed me she acted correctly, but correct and secure are not invariably synonymous. That evening, I resolved quiet would never shield those I cherished. She glimpsed toward the panel, then back to Trump, who remained static. His jaw secured, but his eyes darted once, constricted and slim like unanticipated depth of scrutiny. Quieting women is not novel. It is honed. It is practiced. It is transmitted like directives and fiscal leniencies, at times with warnings, at times with payments, but perpetually with identical aim. Render verity appear troublesome. Jasmine placed her palm level on the red folder. This occasion differs, not from system alteration, but from its broadcast. This is not concealed maneuvering. It is forefront chronicle. And the populace views not for amusement now. They view to recollect. She scanned the space eyes traversing from media to legislators to aides commencing unease. We have observed the forms, the purchased, quiet, the demanded allegiance, the erased females, and the enriched males. But I repeatedly returned to one aspect. She permitted the interlude to embed, Melania perpetually adjacent, smiling adequately silent when crucial. Jasmine's tone dipped marginally, slicing the stillness like a murmur amid turbulence. We assume we comprehend her, but we grasp solely what permitted visibility. She retreated, eyes fixed on Trump. So presently I inquire, what if even Melania differs from our perception? The chamber had scarcely recuperated from the quiet. The depiction of the youth in the corridor still persisted in observers' thoughts, but Jasmine Crockett persisted. Verity did not halt for emotion, and the ensuing was not sentimental. It was numerical, electronic, and acute enough to carve through every meticulously erected barrier. The assembly unmoved, since Jasmine queried if even Melania varied from global assumption. The media ceased keystrokes, Trump unblinking. Then Jasmine delved into the red folder anew, and this occasion the extraction resembled no proof. It resembled a concealed truth. A solitary envelope sealed cream edges, mildly aged with 5 manual words, atop East Wing, January 2021. The space did not inhale sharply. Unnecessary. That time frame conveyed ample. Mere days pre-White House vacancy, pre-helicopter ascent from South Lawn, pre-all darkened for the Trump lineage. Jasmine elevated the envelope and articulated calmly, like descending a veil, pre-disclosure. This arrived at my workspace 3 weeks past. No sender address, but the script confirmed, via FBI forensic review. This is Melania Trump's personal hand. Trump adjusted for the initial moment in minutes. Minimal, merely the faint realignment of a man sensing his seat unstable. Jasmine parted the envelope, meticulously unfolding the sheet with dual hands. The material dense, ivory inked azure. Each mark appeared purposeful, initial hesitation, then keener, as if the author compelled verity through gritted dentition. She initiated reading. I selected quiet, deeming it safeguarded barren, but quiet evolved my confinement. The terms descended like frost. No remorse, no embellishment, merely the tone of a woman dwelling excessively in a reflective abode. Jasmine's delivery stayed constant. Needless elevation. Every gaze in the chamber affixed to the missive as if radiant. I smiled unwillingly. I positioned beside him as he deceived the globe and utilized my likeness to purify himself. Every female you cited I recognized. I observed. I lingered from fear. Trump immobile, his countenance indecipherable, but his hand now clenched the desk rim so fiercely veins emerged. Jasmine inverted the missive and continued. He declared the world would disbelieve me that I amounted to nothing, sans his moniker. But the day I viewed the necklace invoice, dated identical to 2 other women's compensations, I grasped my transformation. Jasmine halted for respiration, then recited the ultimate line. This concerns not culpability. It concerns liberation. I remain mute to endure, but if mute now, another may never escape. She folded the missive gradually and positioned it on the surface beside the check denoted victory vision. None in the space stirred. As if the flooring anticipated fracture, she regarded Trump anew. So now we recognize the quiet was not merely encircling you, it resided with you. She retreated, permitting the instant to respire. But if she elected now, post all these years, to ultimately articulate, what precisely does she comprehend that we lack? What if a glittering gift concealed the darkest deception? Witness the necklace that binds betrayal to facade. The missive still rested on the surface, creased yet searing. Its quiet persisted, resounding through the chamber, more potent than any eruption. Jasmine abstained from retrieving it. Instead, she turned to a modest velvet container, silver-edged, stationed at her table's distant extremity like an overlooked adornment. She parted it gradually, unveiling something that gleamed under the beams, a necklace. The linkage seized the camera's sheen. Scores of white diamonds encircled a lone emerald teardrop facet embedded in platinum. It was refined, costly, stately. Jasmine bore no smile as she displayed it. She merely permitted it to convey. This necklace, acquired in December 2006 at the Tiffany & Company premier location in Manhattan, originally commissioned under initials KM with a confidential directive maintained unrecorded. That invoice, she remarked, pivoting to the display addressed to Karen McDougal. The chamber tensed, but 2 days post-payment clearance, the directive rerouted to alternate identity Melania Trump. Inhalations echoed the secondary row. One congresswoman adjusted noticeably in her seat. Trump avoided upward glance. He fixated forward static, like rendering the proof non-existent via non-recognition. Jasmine wrapped the velvet container once, then activated a control in her opposite hand. The display reactivated, presenting a pre-recorded clip. The female on screen sported a Tiffany emblem, positioned against a stark white setting. "My name Jenna Ryerson and I have served at Tiffany's 12 years. She expressed lucidly, expertly, sans ornamentation. In December 2006, I directly managed a redirected commission for this necklace. The patron altered the shipment name 2 days, post-finalizing disbursement. Highly atypical. We were directed against issuing a secondary invoice. Did Melania collect it? No sign by confidential carrier, but the initial name on the casing never excised from our internal registry. The display dissolved to obscurity. Jasmine regarded the necklace, then addressed the chamber. So let us traverse what we ascertain. 2 females compensated to dissolve. 1 female bestowed a necklace. The invoices authentic. The quiet coordinated. But the adornment, the portrayal of marital harmony, never truly hers initially. She sealed the container gradually. The necklace re-encased. The disloyalty endured. Trump adjusted faintly. A jaw tick, a digit flicker. Yet he voiced nothing. The surrounding space grew hushier. Not from disinterest, but from the shared exhalation none recalled to release. Jasmine progressed one final pace. This was no present. It was a narrative veil. 1 female, expunged. Another adorned in gems. But not even 20 carats can erase what you were never intended to adorn. She pivoted to the panel, tone balanced. So now we query, can a first lady unwittingly bear another woman's falsehood? What invisible scars do the innocent bear? Explore the hallway moment that humanizes the cost of secrets. The necklace vanished. The display subdued, but something denser than gems or trails lingered in the venue. Jasmine stood silently a moment, hands interlaced before her, as if steadying for the ultimate surge in a gale. Then she addressed not the panel, not the lenses, but something far tougher, the facet of authority that imprints wounds. Last year I traversed a passageway just beyond this chamber. It was tardy. The session concluded. Most media departed, but in the rear hallway past the detention area, I spotted a young male solitary. She omitted his name. Needless. All recognized. He was lofty, slender, too youthful. For this edifice, too muted for its clamor. He lingered in shadows directly behind the security boundary, hands pocketed, face averted to the wall. The instant he detected approaching cameras, he retreated swiftly, instinctively like a youth, concealing behind a portal. He unaware it stood ajar. He appeared neither enraged nor terrified. He seemed weary. Jasmine's tone gentled, but not from compassion. No theatrics, merely reminiscence. At times, the blameless shoulder the load of unrequested confidences. They inherit unclaimed burdens. They learn prematurely which passages to conceal in and which inquiries to evade. Not from personal fault, but from another's. The chamber static. Even scribes halted typing. One intern on the lateral bench swiftly swiped a tear with her cuff, hoping unobserved. Jasmine reverted to the table and rested her palms beside the red folder. We have discussed currency, quiet disloyalty cloaked in bows. But occasionally the most resounding harm arises not from the outrage. It arises from what transmits wordlessly. She regarded Trump directly now. No wrath, just accuracy. I observed him that day positioned in the passageway, concealing not from his errors but yours. Trump reciprocated the stare. His visage inscrutable, etched in granite. But something in his carriage altered scarcely. A delay. A beat extended. Jasmine refrained from pressing. Unnecessary. She returned to the panel and withdrew. Her concluding terms subdued enough to haunt. There exists a distinction between shielding kin and employing them as shield. One necessitates forfeit. The other necessitates quiet from those too immature to fathom the toll. She halted, eyes anchored on Trump one final occasion. So the inquiry now straightforward. After all this, after the disbursements, the fabrications, the gem, the missive, will he at last concede his actions? Or will he permit the burden to descend once more on his offspring? What if digital ghosts refuse to stay buried? Dive into the metadata maze that doubles the deception. The chamber scarcely regained from the quiet. The youth's hallway image still loitered in watchers' minds, but Jasmine Crockett endured. Verity shunned pause for feeling, and the subsequent was not effective. It was calculative, virtual, and keen enough to sever every painstakingly built safeguard. She grasped the control and pressed once. The displays animated with scan streaks of information. Subtle imprints figures concealed beneath erasure strokes. It resembled chaos to most, but Jasmine articulated as the feed clarified, unveiling the hallmark of tampering below. This, she proclaimed, is what was destined to remain obliterated. The information extracted from internal fiscal safeguards linked to Trump's 2016 bid. They had been overwritten doubly. Jasmine's group utilized AI-augmented forensics to reclaim what mortal vision overlooked. It disclosed something unforeseen. 2 discrete transactions, identical sum, identical intent, directed to the same individual under varied labels. Michael Cohen. The initial transfer from a facade firm dubbed Red Summit Strategies. The subsequent 3 weeks, hence via a Nevada-rooted body registered Eastern Capital Holdings. Both quantities matching, both tagged legal advisory, but both repayments for the identical outlay, the Stormy Daniels Accord. Jasmine approached the exhibit, her tone subdued, yet charged. Dual ledger, dual deceit, dual quiet. A surge traversed the space like a quake. The display transitioned to exhibit Cohen's sealed deposition, now authorized for communal disclosure. Within, he verified the setup. He tendered 1 bill. He acquired 2 disbursements. Directives originated from the apex. Trump's counsel commenced urgent murmurs. Aides keyed rapidly behind him. Trump himself fixated on the display, as if inscribed in a dialect he declined to recognize. Jasmine granted no respite. Forensic review reveals metadata irregularities, timestamps mismatched, records manually modified. The setup altered not merely to conceal the secondary transaction, but to render it non-existent. Except it persisted. And now the setup testifies itself. Chairwoman Powers inclined ahead, her tone serene yet constricted. Thus the bid compensated him doubly, Jasmine affirmed. Indeed, once to resolve the issue, and once additional to enter the proof. The display enlarged on the audit path. A crumb trail abandoned by one assuming deletion adequate. Jasmine's technical specialist had rebuilt it stroke by stroke, affirming not mere trickery but purpose. The secondary tag beneath vendor aid Q4 Sands attached bill. This exceeded careless accounting. It was crafted amnesia. Jasmine surveyed the chamber, securing eyes with affiliates of both factions. If this design occurred once, it can recur. And if twice, it already has. She returned to the surface, placing the printed scan adjacent the red folder. A fresh form of proof now resided in the annals, numerals, undeniable and quiet, inexplicable. She confronted the panel, tone lucid. We have witnessed what transpires when females are muted, but what transpires when setups commence retorting. She halted, permitting the display to imprint on all present minds. So now we query what transpires when federal inquisitors reopen dossiers they once deemed sealed. What if an email could unravel a web of hidden wires? Tune in for the message that hides nothing from the truth. The numerals had spoken, but Jasmine recognized trails signified not sans identities. She diverted from the forensic duplicate and grasped a lone printed leaf, informal in structure yet volatile in substance. One line atop, forwarded internal correspondence, restricted sequence. The address pertained to Hope Hicks. Date February 17th, 2007. Jasmine eschewed dramatization. She merely recited aloud. Can we ensure Melania avoids viewing the February transfer? The chamber delayed reaction, the sort of phrase that infiltrates gradually, then erupts. She elevated her gaze as the displays ignited anew. One flanked the complete correspondence thread monochrome, the other a real-time summons stream. Hope Hicks manifesting distantly, her visage bordered by the barren backdrop of a governmental testimony chamber. Jasmine neared the amplifier. Miss Hicks, is this communication genuine? Hope blinked, inhaled, and nodded singularly. Yes, that is my correspondence. Her tone diminutive, deliberate. A counsel inclined into view just posterior, scarcely perceptible. Jasmine proceeded. Who is K in this communication? Hope wavered. Karen McDougal. No response from Trump, but his right hand compressed firmly on the surface vein prominent. And the February transfer, what did it denote? Hope's eyes darted downward, then upward. The repayment for the Karen transaction. There was apprehension. It would appear inappropriately. She omitted Melania's name anew. Needless. Apprehension from whom? Jasmine inquired. The query clean like a blade. Hicks delayed, extended, then articulated from him. The stream severed moments hence. Testimony concluded. Harm inflicted. The space lingered mute, a beat prolonged. Then Jasmine approached the panel. So we presently possess proof that an insider in the Trump apparatus knew of a transfer, knew it required concealment, and knew Melania Trump must never behold it. She wrapped the correspondence duplicate on the surface once prior to aligning it beside the necklace container in the forensic duplicate. The elements commencing to converge, currency tampering, and the apparatus of devotion masked as management. This surpassed mere hiding. It was dominion. One communication, one tap. One, and abruptly the first laddie's quiet was not merely tactical. It was administered. Jasmine regarded Trump outright, who still withheld speech. His eyes anchored forward, but his demeanor shadowed tighter, chillier. She redirected her focus to the panel. For if a loan transfer could destabilize a union's base, what variety of verity did it harbor that they dared not risk her citing? And more vitally, why did concealing it seem more pressing than rectifying its origin? What final words from a dying man could unlock the ultimate proof? Hold your breath as the feed cuts in the most dramatic way. The visual shimmered pre-full manifestation. Grainy, subdued illumination, a medical cot posterior. The male on screen wore a slender oxygen conduit along his cheek skin, pallid against the plain blue medical robe. His identity obscured from the annals, but all grasped the essence. He once senior fiscal overseer for the Trump organization, and now years onward, he consented to articulate one ultimate occasion. Jasmine presented him quietly, tone more grave than calculated. He contacted days prior via mediator, soliciting to provide sworn account pre-time expiration. His form waning, but his recall incisive. The display stabilized. He modified the cover on his lap. His hands trembled, but his tone steadfast. I executed as directed, but I documented the verity, just an event. No staged interlude, no sympathy prompt, just terms, uttered with the mass of one who bore quiet excessively. He narrated dual bills, obscured registers, internal directives diverted through facade ledgers, tagged media oversight, and at the core repayments linked to quiet transactions masked as fiscal deductions. Jasmine observed him intently, arms intersected, posture static. The panel notated, even Trump static, now inclining marginally ahead, eyes anchored on the display like awaiting the extent of the man's disclosure. But the witness, unyielding, they requested I erase specific records pre-review. I declined. I relocated them, then transcribed them manually off-grid. I preserved them, for I foresaw someday inquiry might arise. A wave traversed the space, not resounding, intrinsic. The sensation of comprehending something irreversible unveiled. Jasmine progressed softly. Do you retain those manual notations? The male regarded the lens directly, and then alteration occurred. His mouth parted as if to articulate, but no terms emerged. His eyes fluttered swiftly, the display distorted. A flat digital disturbance swept the monitor. Then void. The stream vanished. For an instant, none stirred. Jasmine dipped her head, eyes sealed momentarily, as if tendering a mute farewell to an unmet soul. Then she uprighted, her tone even yet frostier now. This was a male who safeguarded verity when others would not. He may not complete his account, but the proof he cited endures. She pivoted toward the displays now immobilized on blank, and then to the panel. He transcribed those notations not for self-preservation, for a day akin this. When fabrication crumbles and documentation evolves, defiance, her gaze swept the space. So the inquiry now is not if he conveyed verity. It is this: where resides the original ledger? What chaos erupts when truth steps into the light? Experience the storm outside as Jasmine faces the divided crowd. By the moment Jasmine Crockett traversed the marble portal of the Capitol, the external air had morphed violent with clamor. Hundreds of tones clashed on steel barriers, flags brandished like arms, and megaphones blared into the overcast Washington heavens. Some chanted her name in rage, others in admiration. Red caps, poster boards, tear-marked visages alleging treachery. It surpassed mere demonstration. It was a confrontation unfolding on pavement. A surveillance drone lingered overhead, seizing the turmoil from all perspectives. The tale had splintered into dual existences. Trump's advocates howled witch pursuit and shadow government fabrication, while his critics elevated stills of the digitized check and murmured at last. Within the chamber, verity methodical externally. It was visceral. Jasmine halted as journalists surged like insects to blaze. She avoided the amplifier. Not immediately. Her eyes traversed the throng, beyond the chants, beyond the wrath, to the shaking palms of a girl, scarcely 16, clutching a placard that read simply, "What if she is correct?" That motivated Jasmine to advance, not for uproar, but for lucidity. When she articulated, her voice avoided elevation. It impacted. Verity belongs to no faction. It ignores your ballot status. It persists because someone, someplace inscribes it and declines to incinerate the sheet. The journalists inclined. Demonstrators mocked. Distantly, someone hurled a plastic vessel that rebounded off the Capitol stairs, innocuous yet emblematic. A male in leather outerwear bellowed, "She seeks to incarcerate the leader." Jasmine rotated her head, eyes serene yet resolute. "I seek to incarcerate none. I seek the American populace cease being deceived." The din lessened. Merely a portion, but sufficient. She elevated a duplicate of the check, tagged Victory Vision, endorsed with the identical unsteady hand America witnessed on Trump's trail. It fluttered gently in the gust, its paper borders slicing the camera's enlargement. Behind her, congressional personnel formed a silent barrier of unity. No chance, just existence. They labeled this defamation. But when every strand connects, when every tone narrates the identical tale in varied inflections, how many alignments are excessive? A halt. The breeze intensified. The Capitol towered posterior like a rock guardian. The banner above rigid in the strain of split devotions. One additional phrase. And she recognized it must penetrate deeper than all the tumult. Does verity hinge on the teller or the observer? Then she retreated inward, leaving solely the quiet of that query lingering. Not a declaration, a defiance one America could no longer disregard. What single vote could rewrite history? Feel the tension as the gavel decides the fate of hidden records. The chamber was mute, but far from serene. It was the mute that hummed behind visions that adhered to the roof like thunderheads awaiting rupture. One after another, names resounded in the tally, each sound amplified. Jasmine sat motionless, hands clasped, eyes fastened on the timber desk ahead, as if it might ignite upon blinking. Across, Trump's legal advisor murmured into a handset that shook in his grasp. The proposal to compel Donald J. Trump's full fiscal annals campaign individual and post leadership. 42 votes uttered. The figures oscillated like a fading swing. Democrats maintained formation. Republicans recoiled, eyes flitting like ensnared avians. But Congressman David Langston from Ohio, he who once termed January 6th, an essential adjustment, inclined to the amplifier and lingered, a half respiration extended. Aye. The term struck the ground like a judge's strike. Perceptible inhalations. One Republican had reversed. For a fragment, even Jasmine's countenance fractured. Not in victory. In incredulity, the recorder reiterated the sum. Lenses flashed crimson. 53 to 47. The compulsion proposal approved. Merely one vote beyond the brink. One stone extracted from a barrier enduring years. Jasmine ascended gradually, not to celebrate, not to articulate yet, but to meet Langston's gaze and affirm with a nod. He avoided reciprocity. He merely sealed his dossier, as if entombing something or stealing for graver. Jasmine ultimately advanced. Folks believe history advances when leaders endorse legislation, when commanders advance, when tribunals decree. But occasionally it advances because one individual falters and declares, "I can deceive no further." The chamber withheld applause. Needless. Aides exited the space as if pull inverted. Journalists shouted into devices. Trump's position vacant, but the silhouette he abandoned appeared to densify with each elapsing instant. Even the depiction of Washington on the partition seemed to incline marginally toward the base. Jasmine positioned one palm on the desk, no forms, no display, and articulated what required. It requires merely one individual to propel history. But the query is, will equity trail verity or trail the maneuvering? None responded. Not presently. But in the recesses of the chamber where authority typically conceals and lingers, something altered. A mass had displaced. And the remainder of the nation, observing via divided displays and splintered verities, was poised to determine their true allegiance. What mysterious call could echo from the shadows? Unravel the voice that hints at deeper unspoken truths. The capital had vacated, but the tempest lingered. Jasmine sat solitary in her workspace, the overhead fluorescence flickering like a pulse faltering. Her jacket still bore the day's burdened shoulders, tense eyes, partially attuned to the encompassing quiet. The metropolis' external roared vehicle signals chance shattering alerts. But in this instant, solely the pulsing red indicator on her desk phone ventured interruption. One fresh message. She activated playback. The tone was serene, elder measured. It provided no identity. "You accomplished what we could, not," it stated. "You rose when vital." Gratitude. The interval post those terms extended like a cable spanning dual spires. Then the connection severed. No digits, no trail, no backdrop, just a subdued vibration encased in 4 phrases. Jasmine, immobile. Not instantly. She fixated on the device as if it might reverse replay disclose beyond appreciation. But it refrained, and something therein rendered it more authentic. She grasped the handset, navigated to the message anew, and erased it. Not from insignificance, but from excess meaning. External her pain, the Capitol's dome loomed against the nocturnal, like a colossus observing history expand. Internal. Her thoughts replayed the tone, the rhythm, the intonation, the reserve in omitting apology, but something profounder. Was it her? The female, unseen since the session's onset. The female whose gazes seldom betrayed her quiet, whose existence haunted more banners than her terms ever. The one whose necklace remained unclaimed. Jasmine reclined, exhaling through her dentition. Some verities require no utterance to comprehend. In her workspaces, Nook the television activated. Another analyst, another hypothesis, another cycle of what ensues. But Jasmine disregarded. Her mind traced the silhouette behind the tone. A female once adorned in gems, now murmuring from afar. And for the premier occasion all day, Jasmine withheld speech. She merely permitted the instant to embed in the space like vapor. A prior First Lady had extended not to purify her moniker, not to solicit absolution, but merely to convey someone ultimately achieved what she could not. But which that was the query that would persist like aroma in a sealed chamber. Was it the tone of remorse or the tone of caution? And what did she grasp that remained unrevealed? What closing words could seal a legacy of lies? Feel the final gavel as Jasmine delivers the ultimate verdict. The ultimate strike had not descended, but the space already resembled a tribunal post-judgment, mute, frigid, and resounding with assessment. Jasmine Crockett positioned central, framed not merely by stone and amplifiers, but by every American screen attuned unwavering. Her palm rested softly on the red folder that initiated, all now frayed its borders gentle, like a combat standard born excessively. The atmosphere constricted, packed with unvoiced matters. Even Trump, slumped in bearing, could not summon his customary sneer. She avoided tone elevation. Needless. This never pertained to union. Jasmine asserted tone-firm eyes, secured across the divide. It pertained to authority and whom it shields when lenses deactivate. None stirred, devices suspended midway. Scribes halted inscription. The verity resided not in the terms, in the ensuing quiet. She regarded the panel, then the balcony, and ultimately direct to the primary CS-pan lens. The one multitudes observed, the one unblinking. Men akin to Donald Trump tumble not from deception. They tumble from believing they exceed inquiry too mighty, to restrain too affluent to regard whom they injure. There it resided the conclusive charge, not scripted in statute but in transparency. Trump adjusted in his position, mouth faintly agape, as if seeking utterance, finding naught to arm. Posterior his legal cadre gazed downward at their volumes, the sheets now irrelevant. Jasmine retreated a solitary pace. We existed not to analyze a union. We existed to scrutinize a apparatus, a framework constructed to mute, divert, and consume any who ventured articulation. External demonstrators still wailed. Internal, the illuminations subdued as the session neared closure. But the radiance from the displays persisted, casting elongated silhouettes of every cited name, every exposed disbursement, every unwound fabrication like a parcel, with an internal ticking mechanism. Chairman Graves struck the strike once, then doubly. The gathering concluded, but the accounting did not. Jasmine pivoted, collected her documents, and proceeded to the egress, gradual, purposeful, like one not departing a space but guiding it onward. Lenses attempted pursuit. Personnel extended to seize her demeanor, but she avoided rearward glance. Not once. In the corridor, she bypassed an aide murmuring into a device. "It is concluded," he stated. But it was not. Not for the contributors who freshly learned their funds muted females. Not for the legal cadre now confronting national examination. Not for the millions of Americans observing, pondering how many frameworks rigged overtly. And not for the female who once bore a necklace destined for another. For when Jasmine Crockett articulated her concluding lines, she addressed not solely Trump. She addressed the specter of every concealment woven into authority, awaiting one audacious enough to scorch the joins. And the country, still breathless, inquired, not if matters altered. They inquired what transpires now that we have beheld it. What legacy endures beyond the scandal? Journey to the graveside where personal roots meet public triumph. The capital had vacated, but the burden persisted. Jasmine Crockett stood solitary now. Not in a tribunal, not in the glare, but in a serene nook of Arlington where no lenses trailed. The turf damp from nocturnal precipitation. She knelt pre the marker fingertips, grazing the inscribed name like etching reminiscence into stone. Her mother's name carved beside a modest symbol, a cross with a stethoscope coiled round. Nurse informant dismissed, overlooked. Jasmine recalled the timbre of her mother's voice, subdued, serene, unyielding, informing her as a youth that verity did not perpetually prevail, but perpetually imprinted. From her overcoat compartment, Jasmine extracted a petite silver emblem. It seized the dawn gleam like a spark of resistance. The inscription thereon, simple, yet decades earned, I articulated. She embedded it in the soil just beneath the marker, securing it like a vow. I did not achieve it solitary, she murmured. A wind burst traversed the foliage like a respiration too burdensome to retain. Jasmine lingered there motionless, recollecting how her mother's narrative was expunged from facility annals. How none desired to credit a state authority could be harsh behind sealed portals. How they informed her remained mute or jobless, and she elected verity and forfeited all. Jasmine sealed her eyes. She viewed no burial. She viewed a route, one paved in quiets that ultimately shattered. Stormy's tone. Summers recording leases. Register the quivering fiscal overseer, a gem necklace intended for another. And her mother, the premier female Jasmine, had witnessed rise and decline erasure. It was never solely one female. The media would declare Crockett unveiled Trump, but Jasmine comprehended otherwise. This was an accounting erected by numerous palms. Some overt, some concealed, some interred long pre-today. She ascended, gradually brushing soil from her overcoat. Her gaze tarried on the emblem, one final occasion she diverted. The wind altered anew, gentle this occasion like respiration released in solace. As she progressed toward the portals, something in her stride transformed. Not swifter, not slower, merely denser with awareness. The country had beheld the sessions, but Jasmine had inhabited the narrative long pre the banners. And now at the brink of one burial, in the onset of something additional, the genuine query pertained not to fault or purity. It pertained to inheritance. And who ventured to propel it onward? What ripples spread when one voice awakens a nation? See the aftermath that inspires a movement beyond the screen. Displays flickered nationwide airport hubs, care facilities, tavern televisions, volume subdued. A concluding collage scrolled banners blaring in capitals. Networks divided, screening Jasmine's visage beside Trump's static capture. Demonstration placards thronged urban squares. She articulated no further. Quiet. Verity over authority scrawled in marker on pasteboard projected on tribunal facades like illumination declining to fade. Cable hosts recited names unheard in ages. Karen Summer Stormy, not as sensational gossip, but as testimony. A senator vocalized Jasmine's concluding declaration aloud into the legislative annals. At the UN edifice in New York, a bronze marker materialized overnight external. The women's facility etched with Jasmine's terms, "Silencing women is not novel." But this occasion, it is broadcast. In a serene studio illuminated solely by a desk lamp and dual lenses, Jasmine positioned across the host. Her bearing relaxed, but her eyes bore the fatigue of one who traversed barefoot through inferno. The cosmetics long dissipated. So had the surge. What endured was steel refined, not fractured. The questioner inclined. Congresswoman Crockett posed all the menaces, the litigations, the defamation drives. Was it valuable? Jasmine delayed response. She glanced aside camera, as if seeking someone in the gloom unseen. Perhaps her mother? Perhaps every female who ever compacted their narrative merely to persist another dawn. She blinked once, then reverted to the optic. Inquire of the females who remained mute 20 years, she stated, tone subdued, impromptu. Inquire of those who observed their names morph into jests. Inquire of those who observed their offspring, mature, deeming quiet safer than verity. The lens enlarged softly, and then she persisted. Inquire of those who will never remain mute anew. Quiet suspended betwixt. Not uneasy, merely replete. The host withheld reply. Needless. The country had already. As the dialogue concluded, the studio illuminations subdued, but nationwide device screens endured luminous. Remarks flooded beneath the live transmission. A matriarch in Tulsa inscribed, "I wish this occurred in my era." A university pupil in Chicago shared it just did. And in a serene Washington abode, a female whose identity would eternally remain veiled sat solitary by the pane, her palm gently resting on a gem container she never parted, murmuring the terms back to herself. She articulated, in this occasion the globe attended. Some verities are not uttered, they resonate in the quiet of those who withstood excessively. When Jasmine Crockett positioned the nation, she did not merely articulate for sufferers. She demolished the custom of shielding authority over equity. This was not merely an accounting, it was a prompt that bravery requires no authorization. Share this narrative if you deem quiet no longer viable. And inform us if someone required you to articulate for them, would you? If this narrative stirred something within, do not merely scroll beyond. Like, share, and subscribe to Mr. True Stories, because quiet did not shield them, and it will not shield us. Tap the alert because the subsequent narrative might not merely unveil verity, it might require something from you. Which instant lingered with you? Leave a remark. Do not merely observe history, be component of recollecting it. This dramatized narrative is inspired by genuine battles and genuine individuals. All figures and exchanges are fictionalized for analysis and instruction. It is not meant to disparage or deceive, but to encourage contemplation and communal consciousness. Thanks for viewing. Verity is not concluded. It is merely awaiting someone to heed.